All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It is 2 o'clock. So I just want to welcome everyone here to the webinar on the pandemic supports for the payment grant, Understanding Reconciliation. I'm joined today. My name is Caitlin Hackett. I work with 4C for Children as one of the team leads under quality programs. I'm joined today here with Angie Lance, another team lead with 4C under quality programs. Judith Santmeyer, the COO of Okra, and Todd Barnhouse, who's the CEO of Okra. And so we're going to go over a few things about the pandemic payment grant. But before we do, Angie's going to launch a poll to get to know you guys as well. So you're going to see a poll come up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind just answering the couple of questions that are on that poll. And as you're doing so, any questions that you have during this webinar today, if you wouldn't mind entering them into the Q&A option on your screen, we'll be sure to answer as many as we can today. And then any of those that we are not able to answer, Judith and Todd will take back with them and answer at a later date. So go ahead and take that poll for us. There should be 2 questions. Fantastic. All right, so we have quite the number of people here from the Dayton and Cincinnati region, but surprisingly, we have about 38% from other areas than Dayton and Cincinnati. So welcome everyone. And then we do have some family child care, but a majority are center-based programs. So thank you all for taking some time to answer that poll. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. And at the end of the presentation, we'll do our best to answer those questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Judith and Todd, and they're going to launch a PowerPoint for us and go over the payment grant.
Well, great. Thank you for having us this afternoon. We're very excited to talk with all of you and talk through the pandemic support payment grants, especially reconciliation, but we also will talk through a little bit. I'm going to talk through a little bit about the August pandemic support payment grant. So if we go to the next slide, please. Here we go. So hopefully by now, all of you have received the guidance from Jobs and Family Services, Department of Ed, or Okra. You've visited okra.org to find the latest information on the August Pandemic Support Payment Grant. Programs that are going to be eligible for this grant in August are programs that maintain a lower ratio for both August and September. Family child care and in-home aides who did not receive a payment in June or July, so they are newly reopened or newly licensed in August. And the application window will open up tomorrow, August 25th through September 4th. What I want to kind of say too is there's a couple things that have been percolating even throughout today. The State Controlling Board just authorized $9 million to support school-age pandemic childcare. So you will be receiving, if you haven't already received, if you're a center-based or a home-based program from Jobs and Family Services, they've just sent out information detailing the temporary pandemic school-age childcare license. And then there's also this $9 million that's been appropriated to support that effort. And that will support, it's estimated, about 9 weeks of this care. So certainly everyone continues to advocate for additional dollars coming in from the feds or utilizing state dollars, but I thought I'd announce that to you right now. I think that there is a question. I'm sorry, it disappeared. Just a sec. What about if you only receive funds in July? If you received one or the other, you would not be, as a family child care home, you would not be eligible for an August payment. And that was established just due to the fact of we have a new group of programs that will be reopening that are on more of the 9-month schedule. In order to be able to support that, they are that with the funds that were available, that was the best that the state could do at this time. So now, Judith, I'll turn it over to you and you can talk through reconciliation, please.
Great, thank you, Todd. So we are in the culmination of the reconciliation submission for June. So those June grants are, the reconciliation is due by August 31st. We also have the chart here that July is due by September 30th and August is due by August 31st. When we're looking for where the reconciliation is housed, it's in the same place that the application was. So the organization dashboard on the Ohio Professional Registry is where you locate that. On the row that talks about the June month, and if you have June and July, there'll be a row for each. It will say create reconciliation, and that's how you launch the reconciliation site. The components of the reconciliation include 3 sections. The first one is the expense categories. So with this one, we are asking you to provide some summarized data so that you enter the amounts by category. So it's possible that you have multiple receipts for things like cleaning supplies, PPE. You would add those together and give us one amount in each category. When you enter those amounts in the categories, the remaining balance is continuing to calculate and reduce for each amount you're entering so that that amount would be 0. If for some reason the amounts don't equal or exceed award amount, there's going to be a balance in that amount remaining. And at the bottom of the reconciliation in the attestation section, there will be a 4th bullet that appears that says that I understand I have to repay, and it'll be that same dollar amount that's in the amount remaining above. So some folks are missing this section as far as entering numbers, so we want to make sure that everyone's understanding what's happening for that section. The next part is about attendance documentation, and this is for centers only. So we are asking for an uploaded attendance cover sheet, and that cover sheet is available in the reconciliation to download, and then you're coupling that with the documentation that you have for that time period. One item to note is the window that we need attendance records for is between the reopening date and the day before your application was submitted. So for example, if your June application was submitted June 24th and you had a reopening date of June 1st, we would be looking for the window between June 1st and June 23rd. When we look at expense documentation, that too is an upload. And we ask that you label the receipts with the expense category. So in that first section, you're adding up the receipts to put in a total. It's just helpful for our reviewers to know where you were putting which receipt. So being able to label those receipts will be quite helpful to us and reduce the number of questions that they come back to you with if they're not able to follow that. The uploads provided can have multiple pages. So the system will allow 20 uploads. And each one of those can have multiple pages to them because we know for some of the documentation, it's pretty extensive of what you're providing back. Next is looking at expenses incurred dates. So the chart describes those date ranges. So for June, we're specifically working with May 14th through July 31st. For July is July 1st to August 31st, and August would be August 1st to September 30th. So these are the dates that expenses must occur and your documentation must support. So this could be, and we'll talk about what those documentation types are in a moment, but it could be your order forms if you were putting in orders, or restore receipts. Those are the dates that we would be looking at. For allowable expenses, the ODJFS annual procedure letters outline the allowable expense categories. So that's where we look at the cleaning supplies, the PPE, the dividers, and those would be the categories that you're providing us data for. The ratio support payment for centers also includes the personnel working in reopened classrooms. So when we look at this amount, we cannot exceed the amount awarded for ratio support. So some folks are saying, well, I have more expenses in this area than in the COVID-19 payment for personnel, but we can only use up to the amount that was awarded for ratio support. Then our other expenses, we have defined and provided some additional guidance in the guidance documents and frequently asked questions. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you have questions about what's in this section. But the item that we want you to keep in mind here is that there are categories and lists of items that are provided there. But the important thing is that that all rolls up into the other when you're putting it into the expense category. So we just wanted folks to understand that as well, because we've received some questions on that. There's some general guidance about reconciliations. So it is one reconciliation per grant month. So if you have received both June and July, there would be 2 reconciliations total. It is site specific. So if you're working in a multi-site program, there will be 1 per location. The awards for COVID-19 and ratio support are included in the reconciliation, so all the funding received needs to be documented. And the documentation will be uploaded to support those amounts claimed. When we take a look at documentation, it's from a third-party vendor for goods or services that shows order and payment information. It can look a little differently depending on the vendor. Some of it is receipts, like store receipts, purchase orders with payment information, paid invoices, and then in the cases of personnel type costs, we'd be looking at payroll journals or reports from the payroll system. Again, we can't say it enough, but the labeling process is really going to help, I think, providers who are filling out this information as well as the reviewers, just to get a basis of understanding of where items are being placed. And then if you're working with multiple sites, it is possible that information provided will be for multiple sites. So things like bulk purchasing. So it's just clearly labeling the allocation that was used. And we're asking for the purposes of identifying the program that the license number be used. I know some programs have different ways of labeling their sites. It might be street address or town or city. But the license number is really the easiest way to reference, being that universal number. There are a multitude of resources available on the OCRA website that's going to help through this process. For example, this slideshow, the slides that we have today, was pulled straight from the reconciliation guidance document. So these are located on the site and there so that you have that as you're trying to complete these items. So we have links to the manual procedure letters there, and it's organized by month, which is helpful, so that, because each month had a little bit different scenario, as well as the current for August with the ratio that are listed in the letters. Frequently asked question document is there, the guidance documents, as well as the user guide. So the guidance documents are going to provide you the rationale and the foundation to complete the information, what information is needed. The user guides are going to walk you through step by step in the system about how to submit. In a few minutes, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. But after the call and in the future, if you have questions, we ask that you email pandemicsupportgrant@okra.org. This email is monitored by a team of folks that can provide these answers, and we try to do that in timeliest way possible. So at this point, we'll take a
Judith,
look. Yes.
could you re-review the dates? One of the participants has asked, they got July was expenses from July 1st through August 31st. August, I believe, is August 1st through October 30th.
August 1st through September 30th.
Or September 30th, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And then June would be?
June incurred dates would be May 14th through July 31st.
Thank you. And then one of the panel or participant had asked about, they had an approved date of July 21st, and I had posted that checks have been mailed for approved dates up to July 29th, and that we're hoping to send out checks this week and then early next week to close out the rest of the July payments.
Yes. So the next question, are centers eligible for the reduced ratio support for August if they receive funds for June and July? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
It appears we also have some questions taught in the question and answer
Oh, okay.
portion.
Yeah, so if we submit receipts, do we have to do a spreadsheet?
So, so the expense categories, I think it might be the spreadsheet part to that. And the answer is yes. So providing the summary is required as well as the receipts.
And it's when they upload those receipts, they have to fill out the category area and how much the total expenses were for each of those categories, and then upload the receipts.
Right.
I think it might be helpful to say then too, though, for the ratio support, they need to then upload their payroll documentation.
Yes.
You probably already said that.
That's all right.
All right. So next question was, will lower ratios include remote learners? And that answer is no in the childcare setting. Now, the state has put forward the, and it was just approved by the state controlling board to provide the temporary school age or pandemic school age license to be able to serve children that are doing virtual, but they are physically located. The children have to be in the centers or homes. Are centers able to receive August pay? Yes, we answered that. Yes, they are. Will center get summer rate for providing? The answer is no. It is a full-time hourly rate for school age, but it is not the same as the summer rate for school age. And the guidance document and the rates and all that have been sent to your program administrator as far as links to those. So I'd say for any of those types of questions, be sure to review those documents thoroughly, but the posted rates would be in that information as well. Can you please show those repayment dates again? And I believe it's the reconciliation dates, Judith.
Sure.
Maybe just as easy to go up to that slide.
Yes.
The next question is, if we already submitted our reconciliation for June, but we learned something different from this presentation, can we redo it? If you ask, email pandemicsupportgrant@okra.org to have your reconciliation reopened, you would be able to make a revision Of course, you have until August 31st for June to do that. If I didn't receive a July payment yet, do I still need to submit receipts? So we're right now, August 31st is the deadline for June payments. September 30th is the deadline for July payments. So you would have until September 30th for July reconciliation.
The due date for the reconciliation is July, but the expenses incurred would be July 1 through August 31st.
All right, since I messed that up, start that from the beginning, please.
Yes.
My coach is on and I'm doing a bad job. I apologize.
So we have not received the July payment spending before August 31st. So this piece is, for many of you, will be a reimbursement item so that you have expenses, payroll, things of that nature that may have been incurred. And so that is the basis for what we're doing with the payment dates. So again, the dates incurred for July are July 1 through August 31st, then with the reconciliation being due September 30th.
And it ties next into the next question, which is why is there an overlap on time for receipts? There is the reconciliation period or expense incurred periods were extended due to the funding and how the funding was coming to Okra to be able to disperse. So there was additional time added to June and July in order to make the, for the expense window. I'm somewhat confused about how to label expenses. Well, it's based upon, the best thing I'd say, and Judith, see if I get this answer right. If the frequently asked questions, we break out allowable and non-allowable expenses, and it's by category. So I would use that as the guide, because when you go in to fill in your expenses, say cleaning supplies, other things, you'll want to make sure that they line up to the category where that is an allowable expense.
Yes, we also have made it in the system that you can create a reconciliation and save and come back, because we know for some it's going to take a little bit of time to get all of that entered. And so those expense categories are listed in the reconciliation as well as a guide.
The next question is, are we allowed to use items that were purchased from Facebook groups or private individuals? I believe you may have mentioned that already, but I'm not sure.
So it depends on the documentation that is provided. So we will need documentation of purchases, and typically those of made by companies, not so much individuals reselling items. Those would not be allowable.
Okay. And then when applying for the July COVID reimbursement was 1,000, I'm not sure what the question is. So maybe Tanya, if you wouldn't mind expanding upon what your question is. We'll move down, while she's doing that, we'll move down to, so if I received grant money for both months, which month would you submit July receipts, with June or July? So
it is up to the program, because you can utilize this to your potentially advantage as far as how you want those expenses to line up. So you can use July expenses for both the June grant or the July grant. It's just a matter of not duplicating that. You can't use the same receipt for both. So that's the difference there.
Got it. And Tanya put in more explanation. So they were awarded a grant for 1,000. COVID reimbursement was then doubled to 2,000 and reduced from the ratio support payment. Why? And I assume they're a center-based program because they would be the only ones eligible for both parts. I would say, Tanya, if you wouldn't mind hitting us at pandemicsupportgrant@okra.org, we can dig into it a little bit and see exactly what's happened there or why. All right, just to clarify, it is permissible to report expenses exceeding the grant in order to receive the full amount of the grant money that was awarded, and that is yes. For the ratio support grant, is the attendance sheet needed for the reconciliation, or do you have to submit something else for the ratio support as well?
So for the ratio support, you have two sides of that documentation. So one is the attendance sheet with your attendance documentation for centers. And then you have to provide us with the payroll information for the amount of funds used for that.
The next question is, how many months will the reduced ratio support be available? Will it go through the end of 2020? Currently, it will go through August, and we are just continue to advocate for additional funds either at the federal or state level to come into the system. But right now, we can't look beyond August. The August-September grant that we're doing right now is the only committed funding right now that we have, June, July, and August. And then the next question is, for the July grant, do you need to just submit attendance from July 1st through the 14th? We already sent in attendance for June. Do we send attendance for the whole month of June and part of July?
So let's see. So for the July grant, you would provide the attendance from July 1st through the day before your application submission date. So depending on when you applied in July, that would be the range, the first of the month through the day before the application date.
Yeah. And then the next one is, I never received a July payment. Was there another app to do for July? And the answer is yes. Each grant month is independent of the other. And therefore, if you don't apply within the application cycle window, then unfortunately there is no opportunity to get that month. For family child care, will you be able to apply an August and September grant if you received a grant payment for June and July? And the answer is no. Only newly licensed or newly reopened programs will be, family child care programs will be eligible to apply for August. If I have multiple categories per receipt, do I itemize per line item?
Yes, so we ask that you do on the same receipt, it would be marking each category that applies to that. And then in your summary, you of course would pick up that item when you were totaling those.
The next question is, do we need to keep reduced ratios for September in order to receive the ratio support for August? And that is correct. Yes, you do. As the application cycle is August 25th through September 4th, it's crossing over. So you have to guarantee that you're going to do it for August and September. If I submit my June reconciliation on August 31st, but it's returned to me with errors, is there a grace period to finalize the reconciliation? Our team will work with folks to make sure they have everything documented correctly. And our goal is that you do not have to pay us back. So whatever we have to do to make that happen and work with you, we will do the best that we can. But yes, we have. In that case, I'd say submit early so that we can go through it and give you more opportunity to make any revisions if necessary. Please repeat the dates for the receipts for July payments.
Yes, so I have the chart up for that. So the July is July 1 through August 31st.
And we've already answered the question if we receive grant money for both June and July. I'm completely confused about personnel expenses. So if you are a center-based program, you were the only one, that was the category and payment that you were eligible to submit personnel expenses in classrooms. If you are a home based provider, that wasn't an applicable option for you. Ratio support does not have to be strictly payroll expenses, correct? That is correct. It was our assumption that personnel working in classrooms would consume most of the available dollars, but yes, there are, if you look at the frequently asked questions as well as the user's guides for these grants, it tells you what those expenses can be spent on or incurred for. Is it safe to assume that an item not found in the allowable category that is simply not allowable? For example, hand sanitizer is not listed, so I assume that is not allowable. That is not, it's hand sanitizers. Judith, what is the category?
It would be an other and it's hand washing.
Yeah.
So,
So it is an allowable expense.
yes.
I need more clarification on the difference between the two categories. COVID-19 award and ratio support. Payroll would exclusively under the ratio support. That is correct. If you're a center-based program, you were potentially eligible for both a COVID-based payment and a ratio support. Personnel working in open classrooms falls into the ratio support expense category, but it can't be used for the COVID-19 base award. Let's see. So this was a grantee was approved on August 2nd. Do you know how long it would take to receive payment? I'm guessing, if I were to guess, the August 2nd batch is in this, hopefully this week's payments to be processed. If not, it would be early next week. Let's see. On the attendance documentation, what if we were open before June 1st? Still use the attendance from June 1st to the date that we received the grant? Well, that's an interesting question because I'm guessing you were a pandemic childcare program, and then May 31st, we switched to childcare reopening. So that's why June 1st is what the attendance that we're interested moving forward in supplying, because that was what you were eligible for. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. Now, this grant is not eligible or applicable to remote learners. So unless the child is actually at your program, they're not, you're not eligible to submit their attendance. Then can you clarify the timeline? The timelines are posted. Please refer to the chart. Certainly visit okra.org at any time. The frequently asked question has all the timelines posted, as well as the guidance documents. All right, so we've already answered that yes, you go through your receipts and itemize according to category. How would I know if I've submitted something and it wasn't approved? Our team will work with you and you would receive an additional action needed response back. So I certainly continue to check your profile and your notifications to make sure there isn't anything pending.
And in that notification, you'll receive a detailed note about what is needed. So that will help the conversation and next steps.
Yeah, hand sanitizer was answered in other and hand washing. And then where can I find the allowable items list? In the frequently asked questions posted at okra.org. Okay, that cleared out those questions. Let me go back to chat and see. I don't know if there's. Yeah, these have all been answered in the Q&A. Oh wait, there's new. School-age children who are virtual learners in our buildings can be counted in attendance. That is correct. And I apologize, I wasn't getting that from your question. So if you have school-age children that are in your program, they're doing virtual schooling, they count for you, yes. And please clarify the 20-page limit. You can scan multiple pages. It's 20 uploads, I believe, is the limitation. Is that correct, Judith?
That is correct. So there's an additional question. Does the payroll reporting need to include the tax expenses incurred by the company on behalf of the employee in addition to the amount paid? The taxes are an allowable expense, but it's up to the organization if that's what you're trying to claim. If that is the case, we would need to know that information as far as the employee you're trying to claim and how much.
And then we have a question under my application tab. I never did have a tab for July pandemic app. So I assume that potentially you went in after the application deadline. That tab is only available during the window. So for the August, it will only be available August 25th through September 4th. And each of the June and July had an application cycle. That for homes, it was different than centers. For August, it's the same.
We just opened on August 17th, so I cannot submit any expenses in preparation if receipts are dated June or July. And so with an August 17th date, your next window, if you're a center, would be in that August. And so that is correct that the June and July receipts would not apply.
And there's a statement, if we printed a pandemic handbook outlining all the new rules, can we claim ink and paper as other expenses?
Those types of office supply technologies are not allowable.
That keeps us up to date as of right this moment.
All right. Well, unless there's other questions or concerns that we want to address, I'm seeing one more question here. It says, sorry if I missed this, but if we had a service done in June but didn't pay the invoice until August, can we still count that for the June grant?
Yes, because it was for a June service item.
Wonderful. So any additional questions that folks have as they're finishing up for today and think about for the rest of this week can be sent to the pandemic support grant at okra.org, correct?
Yes, and
Yes.
The two questions that I posted are utilities and mortgages allowable. That is not an allowable expense. And then the answer for ink and pen paper or ink and paper was a no, as well as a non-allowable expense. If our salaries are more than our grant, do we need to turn in other expenses? No, if you have documentation for your personnel and payroll, that's more than sufficient.
Unless they're asking if it's for the total award, so it can only be up to the
right.
ratio support.
With July, so June would be the one special month with that because there was an opportunity for a base payment and a ratio support. July was only ratio support, so centers would have been that would have been allowable only for that because they only got one kind. But yes, if you're saying for June, you have to make sure if you have your center-based program, you got a base payment plus a ratio support, payroll can only be used for the ratio support portion. Technology such as iPads, tablets, or computers is not an allowable expense. That's in the FAQs.
We've also, this is recorded, so we will send that out, a link to the recording after the meeting today. And Judith and Todd, just so you know, we had a snafu with people being able to get into the webinar today. So it's great that you were able to get through all the questions. We'll send out the link through 4C so that anyone that wasn't able to join us today will have access to today's recording. But we did have close to about 300 people that were signed up for the webinar today, and only 100 were able to get in. So we'll make sure that the recording is available. All right. I think that's it then. Well, thank you for your time, Judith and Todd.
Thank
Oh,
you.
certainly. Thank you. Thank you for having us, and certainly want to make sure that folks get the money and they're able to use the money, and try to, certainly anything that we can do to improve the processes. We certainly listen to all the feedback and the questions. That's why I always say continue to visit ochre.org for the frequently asked questions, because as a result of these kind of conversations, that's how we update the questions and the responses.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.